let me stop with that. Questions on what I just showed you? Yes.
Okay, so policy-wise, what does that tell you? Should we be working now to draw more manufacturing and get it back into that other quadrant? Or should we be trying to get something else to diversify more?
So that's a good question. What do we have already here? We have a labor supply of production workers that, as I've been told, they are very highly technical people. So the question is, how do you re-engage that labor market? And that re-engagement of that labor market, it could be in anything. The question is, that should be a signal to the market, right? We have lower wages, we have excess labor supply, they're supposed to be high quality. The question I have is, why isn't that already triggering the market, that invisible hand to come here? Why is that not coming? Do you have a thought to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're in trouble all over. But we've got, especially in Kansas, we're increasing their manufacturing costs tremendously with our policies. And that's going to drive manufacturing away from Kansas. But also we've got the competition with foreign companies overseas. And if you'll notice, most everything you buy, it's engineered. Wichita's a favorite thing. It's engineered in the USA, manufactured in Thailand or someplace. So the fact we may have the engineering here is great, but all the jobs are overseas. So we're not in a position to compete with overseas, either in a manufacturing cost factor or a labor factor.
So at what point does our labor costs and our labor availability actually track it? So there's some issues to that. You back up a few years, yes, our competition was to the national market, and that's where we're competing to it. But look at Spirit and their decisions to stay in the United States over on the East Coast.
I think that's a matter of security.
It's a matter of labor supply.
We're one of the more secure countries to operate in. And I think that's one of the things that keeps a lot of the companies here. Otherwise, a lot of companies are moving their manufacturing overseas. When you can pay $2.15 an hour to get something done there, where you're paying $40 here.
So why did Spirit go to Chanute and not here?
To Chanute, well, yeah, you got cheaper wages there.
But you're talking about productivity?
Did you see if they got any incentives where you're?
Huh?
I was just saying, did you see if they got any incentives for moving that part of the plant there? But my whole point is...
But they're not coming. That's so we have a market. The signal should be saying it. They're not happening. But they went over there, right? So that's a problem. I mean, the market should be forcing some of it itself, right? Other thoughts on this? I'm almost done. So if you don't have any more questions, you're done sooner.
So,
yeah.
Do you have any theories as to why the economic signals are not being heeded?
I think, yeah, I've got lots of ideas. However, I will say, because I'm preparing for my Economic Outlook Conference, and I don't actually do any presentations a month and a half before it because I have to prepare for it, I didn't have enough time to go write down everything, down to ideas of what all the factors are. But there are factors, actually, and there are right. There's some labor costs, still relative issues, some mature sector. I mean, I can go on. There are other factors into why they're not necessarily working all the way through.
Is our available labor force that's trained here from the aircraft, is this an aging out labor force?
So, great question. Actually, yes, aging. Are the production workers getting older? So I actually am paying a professor this summer. He's studying the aging workforce in manufacturing, and he went and talked to some of the local firms here, and he's putting out a paper pretty soon that we'll actually publish on our website to start thinking about that dialogue. I've talked to SHRM. They said there's concerns about our aging workforce and maybe some longer-term investments to that. But that's unclear. We don't have detailed data other than what SHRM or HRM managers have told us. Carl, you had a question. I saw your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to see the next slide.
Next slide. Exports. Here's the value of exports, which I love this data because it looks like it's a January, but it actually goes further into it. Here's the value of exports. And this is a good picture. I love this. This is the top commodities in the state. Top commodities in the state. This is why I say aerospace really does influence. Now, this is, I got to be clear, this is value of Kansas exports outside of the country. So we're not always we're not capturing all the agriculture that's exported to other states or anything like that. When you look at the value outside of the country, you look at aerospace coming to that peak, and then it comes down and looks pretty much flat. The first 6 months of this year, and this is good news, the first 6 months of this year is up, I think it was 20-some% over the first 6 months in 2013 in aerospace exports. And also, if you look at Gamma's reports, the business jet side was the first time it was up, and it was like 22-25%, somewhere around there. So this is positive news all of a sudden. Did you want to comment on that now that you got to it?
Well, I just couldn't sort out from here which
Oh.
which was where, and I really
So-
wanted to see who was on top, which it turned out to be.
This is aerospace right here, and here's aerospace right here.
Let me ask you kind of a process question. The energy area in general, and oil and gas in particular, has done very well in
Yep.
Kansas recently. Where would they show up on that chart?
So I didn't pull that because that wasn't the top valued exports, but I can actually show, but
That
we
would be a
don't.
separate category, and that's excluded.
The problem with that is exports out of here to out of the country, and so we're using some of that domestically. So a lot of our energy side is not included. That actually goes back to that comments. Remember I said here's the growth factors and here's energy. Here's another factor that should be driving companies here. We looked at competitiveness of Kansas to other countries, and we did a in-depth study. If you want to see that, that's 150 some pages of how competitive we are. And our point was we are very competitive. We have definitely a comparative advantage. We have almost an absolute advantage in a lot of the categories that matter. And when you look at energy, our energy prices right now, and for the last few years, have actually been very competitive. That should be another price signal for companies to come here, but they're not. That's a concern. And we're going to lose that energy status. I'm very negative against our energy costs. I think we're going to actually get really expensive on other sources of energy besides natural gas. Yes, back there?
Well, I've sat here all morning and listened, and I've been to some other things, and I've never said this.
Please say it.
And I think that the biggest problem with Kansas is our point of view and our politics. And I've lived in California, I've lived in North Dakota, I've lived in Oklahoma, I've lived overseas. And what I get from people is, oh dear, you're from Kansas?
So,
You know, because we are looked at conservatively, we have politics that are conservative, we have been made fun of for our ideas, and I'm not saying whether they're wrong or right. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's the view you get. And that, I think, comes into play when these companies are coming here. What is your quality of life? What are the politics? And I think, and I love Kansas. I was born here, and while I've lived other places, there's never been a year of my life that I was not back in Kansas for some reason. And I love Kansas. But we are willing to settle for mediocrity, oftentimes, because we don't want to pay for it. We are tighter than ticks.
so
And I think that comes into play when these companies, you might not think so, maybe that's something that's not even thought of consciously. You know, you're looking at all your hard facts, you're looking at all this other stuff, but there's a human element, human nature, and I don't think anybody ever takes that into everybody wants to look at their hard facts, but you've got to look at people.
So I think that's perfect. So when I did the competitiveness for aerospace for the governor, when he looked at all these things, I said, look, you look at all these factors, we either have it or we were pretty competitive. We have a lot of rail lines. We have transportation is not as important component in economic development, but we have transportation. You know, I went all the way through it and I said, look, when you start coming down to it, it's actually image. And I related this story, and I'll tell you the story. I say it a lot of times. I went to Topeka High, graduated from Topeka High. My whole family is from Kansas, by the way. We have land all over the state. My whole family left, and I was one of them. I said I was leaving, and I was never coming back to Kansas. And I grew up in Kansas, and I had a negative attitude about Kansas. And then I came back, and I saw Wichita, and my mind has completely changed. It's just it's a poor image of the state. It looks like we are just wheat and cattle and Dorothy. And that was my point when I did the competitiveness study. And it comes to labor. When you see that the population and labor issue, during this whole recession, you could say during the whole recession, I mean, just a year after we started this recession, HR managers said we can't find the right employees. Right after we got in this recession, they can't find it. It wasn't that we weren't producing engineers. They were just needing engineers with a certain level. And actually, John Tomlin made that comment. It's about attraction of labor, the mobility of labor here, right? It's a bad image. He made it earlier. That's actually the story I told a couple of years ago. It's clearly our problem. One of the problems there is we have a poor image. And that's an easy one to overcome, right? I mean, we should overcome our image. We should overcome our image to ourselves and help other people see us in a very different light. Because Wichita is a great place. I absolutely love it. My sister came back. My whole family, by the way, has left. I'm the only one now in Kansas. The only one. My sister came back. She's in Phoenix. She said, you know what? I take my comments back. Wichita has everything a big city has, but you can actually go see it and do it. Like, she can't go see her zoo in a day and come back. I mean, it's a full experience. We've got a lot here, and it's really kind of neat. Even not here, but even the micropolitans, the smaller MSAs, there's some values there that people don't really understand, and it's a shame. I didn't understand it either when I grew up here.
Well, this kind of relates because one of the other slides, one of the other presenter was talking about bringing people from the coast to the flyover country, the Central Plains. They didn't want to come, and I experienced that a lot when Pizza Hut corporate office was here. They would bring in these young executives from big universities in Atlanta and the coast and everything, and they thought they were dropped off to the far ends of the earth. I mean, they thought they were dropped off in nowhere land. And the problem was they wanted to spend big bucks and go see a big baseball team or this or that. They wanted somebody to entertain them instead of looking to see what we gave. It's a great place to raise families. And I think the thing that the university is doing well is getting the people that want to live here because they like the lifestyle here, they like the environment here, and growing those people because they're going to stay here. And I think that's important for us to remember. We're not going to draw companies from those other places because those people don't want to live here. They have an image problem. They don't want to look at the real amenities that we have and lifestyle that we think is great.
So when I talked to several companies when I was coming up with their competitiveness, I said, look, why don't we work with Coke? Because you know what they're dealing with, they're having a problem with, and comes about to prices, to wages. They have a hard time finding business professionals, and they're competing heavily they're poaching everyone else locally. They're raising prices up in accounting and business professional services because they need more demand. That's the signal, right? They're sending the signal out. We need more people. They're pushing wages up, trying to attract them. Why don't we go and help them go after the other business schools right around the region? It's really simple to give targeted messages. Look, here's a great business community, great excitement here. Same thing with aerospace. We need other aerospace engineers. We can produce a lot, but they're all the same Wichita State. I mean, nothing wrong with Wichita State. We need other kinds of engineers. We already know, and I looked at it, I already know where all the engineers are being produced all over the United States. I can go to Atlanta or whatever, and we already know, because I looked at the data, most of them in engineers don't stay where they go. Other college degrees, you actually stay closer to your degree, but engineers, they're high concentration in a few locations. It's not that hard to start telling them the right message about Wichita being a great community when they're in school. So when they graduate, they already know about, look at all these firms here. It's a great aviation place to go with an engineering degree. It wouldn't be that hard. And you're trying to step up and stop, or? No, I'm not. I'm just trying to keep us moving. Well, let's let her do it. She had a question before.
Well, it's not a question. I just think it's a suggestion. Maybe we need some statistics on people who have moved here and then their attitude.
I have looked at the migration patterns about people moving in. I can show you that, but I don't have their attitudes though.
Well, that's what we're worried about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
on your previous slide, you had showed that the market for labor is fairly inexpensive here, and you posed the question of why that's not happening, why the market signals aren't being communicated. Is the labor market in Wichita area so specialized?
So-
Or more than you would see nationally?
So I can already tell you, we look at, if you want to see great data, I look at unemployment insurance claims, and I can tell you exactly what industries they came from and what they're in. Do you know where we have the excess labor supply? It's the production worker side, right? So they are specialized, right, in some ways, but that's actually what is in the highest demand across the United States is machinery, some of those technical skills. That's the highest demand, yet we're sitting excess right here. Jeff, you guys comment?
No, it's a question. We just heard the most negative presentation on incentives before this that I've ever heard in my life. Do you have any observations on incentives and Kansas's use or some of the community's uses of incentives in the state?
So let me disclose our role. Our role first is to evaluate every single project for not only GWC, but around this region. Our role is to look at every project. So when we look at something, it's project by project specific, right? We're trying to look at what does that cost back to the government? What does that cost back to the community? And so I just make sure you understand that is our point. And our point is to look at that as accurately as possible. Make sure we count if they're really coming in. Make sure that what is happening is as close as possible as we can estimate on something like that. The reality is, and if you look at all these other market forces, right, they should be telling them. The problem is at the national level, there are other influences preventing that from happening, right? That is one of the many factors. There are other factors local, but there are many factors nationally preventing that flow of businesses from coming here. It should have naturally be here if it was just a competitiveness, because they could be more competitive with the labor market, with quality of labor, with other costs, because transportation cost is minimal anymore. I mean, I can go down the list. We did a whole study. We have almost an absolute advantage in a lot of categories. They should be here. So in some cases, there is a factor where we're not getting them because of the overall national environment. So incentives has some role. What its role, I'm not here to determine that role. That's not my position. My position is to evaluate each project as carefully as I can. Yep.
Would you expect over time either for companies here to find ways to utilize that excess labor to create new manufacturing projects? I mean, just naturally. Or those people to migrate to other places where they're hiring those people where the wages are higher?
So that's a great question. And that gets on a couple of those other elements. Remember, entrepreneurship and innovation. I made a presentation, and I won't have a time to get into, and I'm going to be really candid. I called it being fat and happy. America's fat and happy, and we are fat and happy right here. If you look at the transition of companies, we have a lot of second generation, third generation companies that are not willing or wanting to take entrepreneurial risk. They're not willing to even try to go invest in new innovation. So when we looked at patent activity once was really high here. It is really low. And you can see our patent activity, we've compared it to other cities, we're really low. Look at innovation. One variable for innovation is people going self-employed is really low. So unfortunately, nationally, it's been dropping. Innovation, technology has been dropping. It's also been dropping here because, and my comment is we're fat and happy. We've got enough money. We're satisfied with what we're doing. We're not willing to take the risk. I mean, that's not really the answer you want, but that's one of those variables in here. That's the reality. We're not taking the risk. Should we do it? Yeah. Businesses here should figure out, look, I've got a great opportunity. There's enough labor at a right cost. There's a demand out there somewhere for some product to use this. How do I mix it together? But it's not happening, is it?
Yeah, it makes you wonder what other pressures might be keeping that down. Like, I know for a while there were a lot of little homespun companies were having to label all of their products, all the materials that are in the products. Maybe there are some regulations like that, onerous regulations that are keeping people from being able to produce new products.
So yeah, I mean, well, that's a national then, right? So what do we think locally? It's a problem. So my point, and I don't usually get to try. I made it. I said, taking off the kid gloves. I wanted to make it as realistic as I could possibly make it, and try to normalize all the data as possibly I can, so you can just see what it was. It's a tough situation that we are in. I mean, that there's no doubt. And although people are asking policies, I'm not here to try to point one policy. There's a lot of things that need to happen. And let me give you this. Can I give one perspective? So. In development, economic development, when I taught this, there are development from above and there's development from below. There are multi-strategies. And if you look, although other people have different perspectives, when you look at the academic research, development from above is being deliberate and integrated into a market, figuring out how to solve it. There are great successes and there are a lot of failures. The development from below is creating the atmosphere and doing that. I've seen successes and failures in the literature on both sides. I mean, just the point. The question is, what is the right mix on both of them for this environment? And that's the real question that we need to be thinking about. Not picking one policy, but just what are the right elements of everything that fit together to move this economy forward? We've got this labor. What's the connection to that labor, right? I mean, that's our best asset. And that, diversified or whatever, that labor is what's high in demand nationally. How do we figure out to get both of those policies in line to fit the right thing that we need to do, which is we need to get businesses engaged. We need to figure out how to help them engaged. Exports is one way. I'm going. I can keep going. Sorry. I better stop. I can keep going on this thing. So.